Welcome back to Conflicts of Interest. This is episode 725, and today is December 10th, 2024. I'm the host of the show, Kyle Anzalone. We don't have a ton of news to get through on today's show, but some very important stories to talk about. Additionally, I want to remind people to go subscribe to the Kyle Anzalone Show. We will be recording episode 4 later today, so that means it'll be out this evening or tomorrow morning. And so be sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel to make sure you don't miss that episode. The link is the first link in the show notes page, so it's very easy to find, and I really appreciate if you all could take a few seconds and do that. We are, of course, trying at first to get to that 1,000 subscriber number so we can start to monetize the podcast and get that going. And I definitely have a large enough audience at Conflicts of Interest that if even a portion of you go over and subscribe, we will certainly be able to do that. So please take a moment to do that, and I am going to hop into the news today with this story I wrote for the Libertarian Institute on December 9th. Israeli Finance Minister, time to seize control of Gaza. So Israeli Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich said Tel Aviv should exploit the downfall of Bashar al-Assad in Syria to seize the Gaza Strip. At a meeting of his religious Zionist party on Monday, Smotrich said, "We've seen in Syria how regime leaders flee like rats when they realize they've lost their grip on power. The same can be achieved in Gaza. We are close. We've already made tremendous strides there. Now we must take the next step to secure a decisive and clear victory. It's time to seize control of Gaza and to strip Hamas of its civilian authority, cutting off its lifeline. We must end the policy of containment and defense and shift to an initiative of offense. We must dismantle terror hubs, strengthen Jewish settlements, and create facts on the ground that prevent the establishment of a Palestinian state and remove the possibility from the agenda once and for all." Several top Israeli officials have openly called for the ethnic cleansing of Palestinians from Gaza, as well as building new Jewish settlements in the depopulated Strip. Israeli National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir, the leader of the Jewish Power Party, recently said that Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is open to the idea of expelling Palestinians from the Gaza Strip. Some Israelis officials see Donald Trump's return to the White House as an opportunity to expand Israel's borders, including Smotrich. He said, "It is possible to create a situation where Gaza's population in 2 years will be less than half of its current size." So he's talking about either killing or removing 1 million people from their homes. And encouraging the voluntary emigration is an opportunity that arises with the new administration. So during his address to the religious Zionism party, Smotrich went on to say that Israel should not agree to any ceasefire with Hamas and attempt to free the hostages in Gaza by military force. He explained, "Instead of discussing partial deals that leave many hostages behind, compromise the war's achievements and diminish the chance of victory, we must press forward. We must stop fearing our own shadows and do what is necessary. If we take the necessary steps with God's help, we will see the remaining Hamas leaders flee like rats, desperate to save themselves and their family. This will bring all the hostages home and remove the threat to Israel once and for all." Of course, this isn't true. Israeli military operations have killed dozens of their hostages that are held in Gaza, and Hamas has been willing to agree to deals that see the Israeli hostages released, either in exchange for Palestinian hostages and an end to the onslaught in Gaza and the bombardment and the occupation of Israeli troops, something that Tel Aviv is unwilling to go to. So Smotrich wasn't done with Gaza. He also had to talk about the West Bank. He said that his desire to expand Israel's borders beyond Gaza, including the annexation of the West Bank. So he said the absence of evil's ultimate hope is to establish a Palestinian state there, as he's saying, the West Bank, as the basis for the destruction of Israel. Here too, we must end the policy of containment and defense and shift to initiative and offense. We must dismantle terror hub and strengthen Jewish settlements and create facts on the ground that prevent the establishment of a Palestinian state. Following Trump's election, Smotrich noted that the annexation of the West Bank is a possibility. This radical view is shared by Mike Huckabee, Trump's pick to be ambassador to Israel. And so I think this is really important, and that the Americans right now need to very carefully listen to what Israeli officials are saying, because they are telling you that they are planning to accelerate their ethnic cleansing campaign, the ongoing genocide in Gaza, a genocide that was declared not only on this show, because we saw what was happening on the ground, but also now by Amnesty International in a 300-page report detailing and documenting all these little acts of genocide that Israel has committed over the past year. And the U.S. continues to support Israel. And so, again, we really need to listen to Israeli officials, because they're telling us that they are going to do some really, really bad things to the people of Palestine. And they are going to do it with American weapons and money. And of course, I feel like this situation is all the more dangerous now that Al-Qaeda, Al-Jolani, is ruling in Damascus. Not only is there this massive pile of anti-American Semitism, because, it's not only that our leaders have armed and funded the genocide in Gaza. At the UN, we prevented any resolution that condemns Israel. And maybe even more importantly, we've echoed, the American media, American officials have echoed to our people and to the world for that matter, the Israeli propaganda line on so many issues that, if Hamas just gave up this fighting would be over, if the hostages were just released, all these propaganda narratives, the human shields, that UNRWA, the UN organization, was somehow, affiliated with Hamas and conducted October 7th. All these core lies to the Israeli narrative, that the Hannibal Directive never happened, right? These are major, major lies that the Israelis were telling, and was repeated by the Americans and our media. And so, to the people of the Muslim world, where they see day in and day out Matthew Miller and the rest of the Biden team defending what Israel is doing in Gaza, it creates this massive, massive amount of anti-American Semitism in the Middle East. And of course, then you now have a literal Al-Qaeda stand in the Middle East. Damascus was rolled by the Al-Nusra Front. It's, of course, changed its names a couple times and is now Harit Tahrir al-Sham, but HTS is nothing more than rebranded Al-Qaeda, and the U.S. even has a $10 million bounty on Jolani's head because he is an Al-Qaeda terrorist. So that much is clear. Now, next up, this was just extremely disturbing, but I had to mention this on the show. So there is an article written in Haaretz by journalist Chaim Har Zahav, and he served 86 days in a reserve mission in Gaza, and he's a writer for Haaretz. And so, this is kind of a unique thing that happens in Israel a little bit, where in America, I think we often think our journalists are not the same type of people that serve in the military, where in Israel, because of their general conscription, everybody's serving in the military. Even most of the journalists have served in the military. And so now we're getting this article, which is really interesting for a couple of reasons. One, he discusses orders to shoot Palestinians who are waving white flags and things like that. But this particular paragraph, I think, really defines the Israeli policy in Gaza. So he writes, a human life in the Gaza Strip is worth less than the lives of thousands of stray dogs that roam the area looking for food. While there is a clear order prohibiting the shooting of dogs unless a soldier is in real danger, such as when the dog's jaws are locked on him, humans are permitted to be shot without any real restrictions, except for the personal moral boundaries of the soldier holding the weapon. And so he is saying that the Israeli military will let any Israeli soldier murder whatever Palestinians they want in the Gaza Strip. And I think this goes to show things that we have heard, from American doctors who have been in Gaza, saying there is a massive number of Palestinian children who are being shot by Israeli snipers. Well, if there's the only moral rule is that it's just, or the only rule is the morality limits it and the morality of the individual soldier. And we know we've had funerals of Israeli soldiers where their relatives talked about how they were, happy to kill Palestinian civilians, and that was one of their goals of being in Gaza, was to kill Palestinian civilians. And so there is no doubt that this is a full-on genocide going on. All right, next up here, Israeli attacks Gaza in Gaza kill at least 50 more Palestinians over the past 24 hours. It's been a week or two since we've really drilled down into the official death toll and all that in Gaza. So I thought it would be a good opportunity to do that on today's show, because I don't have quite as much other news as I've had in recent episodes. So Israeli attacks in Gaza, Gaza's health ministry said Monday that Israeli attacks killed at least 50 Palestinians and wounded 84 over the previous 24-hour period. Israeli strikes on Monday, including an overnight attack on the Palestinians in the southern city of Rafah, who had lined up to buy flour. According to Al Jazeera, at least 10 Palestinians were killed in that strike. And so, again, this is a bread line, a literal bread line. People waiting for flour to get some flour to make some bread were bombed by Israel. And I'm sure it was with an American-made weapon. In central Gaza, a significant number of women and children were slaughtered or wounded by Israeli attacks. Bodies were piling up at the Al-Aqsa hospital in central Gaza after at least 9 people from the same family, mostly women and children, were killed by an Israeli strike on a refugee camp. At least 2 children were killed and others were injured in a strike on a separate refugee camp. At least, Israeli strikes also continue to pound northern Gaza, which has been under siege since early October, as a part of the ethnic cleansing campaign there. According to the Palestinian news agency Wafa, several civilians were killed by an Israeli attack on a school-turned-shelter in Jabalia, while others were killed by a strike near the Kamal Adwan hospital in Bet Lahia. Dr. Hassam Abu Saifa, the director of the hospital, which has come under constant Israeli attacks, warned on Monday that over 100 patients' lives were at risk after Israeli bombing cut off the electricity, water, and oxygen. He explained, "The situation is extremely dangerous. We have patients in intensive care units and others awaiting surgeries. Assessing access to the operating room is only possible after restoring electricity and oxygen supply." Gaza's health ministry said the latest violence brought the death toll since October 23, 2023 to 44,758 and the number of wounded to 106,134. The ministry only counts dead and injured Palestinians who are brought to hospitals and morgues. The ministry wrote on Telegram, "There are still a number of victims under the rubble and on the streets. The ambulance and civil defense crews cannot reach them." A group of American doctors who I referenced earlier had estimated back in, I believe this is September, that at least 118,000 Palestinians have already been killed. So no doubt that number has continued to climb. All right, next up here, let's talk about Israel seizing a chunk of Syria. So Netanyahu says occupied Golan Heights will be Israel's forever. So Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said Monday that the Israeli occupied Golan Heights will be Israel's forever, comments that claim a day after Israel captured territory inside of Syria. Israel first took the Golan Heights from Syria in 1967 and annexed the territory in 1981. The move was not recognized by any other country until the Trump administration did so in 2019. So according to his office, Netanyahu said Monday, "I would like to take this opportunity to thank my friend President-elect Donald Trump for acceding to my request to recognize Israel's sovereignty over the Golan Heights. Today, everyone understands the great importance of our presence there on the Golan and not on the foothills of the Golan. The Golan Heights will be forever an inseparable part of the state of Israel. A day earlier, Netanyahu was in the Golan Heights and announced he ordered the Israeli military to seize a buffer zone between the occupied Israeli territory and the rest of Syria that has been patrolled by UN peacekeepers since 1974 under an Israeli-Syrian ceasefire deal. According to Israeli media, Israeli troops captured several areas in Syria that are beyond the buffer zone, including the Syrian side of Mart Haman, mountain range. The land grab also came with massive Israeli airstrikes across Syria, which Israeli officials now framed as being necessary to prevent hostile groups from acquiring weapons left behind by the now disposed government. According to the Cradle, Israel's strikes since Sunday have hit 250 targets across Syria, hitting military bases, air defenses, ammo depots, warehouses, and other military assets. Israeli media reported it as the heaviest Israeli bombing in the country since the 1973 Yom Kippur War. And so, a couple things to mention here. One, apparently Jolani's victory in Syria didn't bring peace to the country because it is now being absolutely pummeled by Israel. Two, they say, we have to take out Assad's chemical weapon depots, but the OPCW has largely certified that those have been successfully dismantled after the 2015 deal between Assad and Putin. And so there's no reason to think that Israel is actually hitting chemical weapons facilities here, likely destroying some of Syria's military assets so that doesn't fall into the hands of forces that they don't like. So maybe Syrian commanders can't take them across the border to either Lebanon to aid Hezbollah or Iraq to aid the Shia militias or the Shia government of Iraq there. And then also, another point to all this is Israel is taking a lot of territory inside Syria. It's unclear at this point of how much territory it is. I saw some reports that Israeli forces were even encroaching on some of the suburbs of Damascus, which I mean, isn't that far from the Golan Heights, but of course, that if Israel starts to encroach on the Syrian capital city, that would be, major. I wouldn't even know if they would plan to seize it or what, but that would be certainly an extremely, extremely hostile and concerning act. And so it seems that Israel is pressing ahead with its advantage in Lebanon. Also, very interesting, would Israel have been prepared to take and capture so much Syrian territory if they still were, trying to occupy and take territory in southern Lebanon? And you really have to wonder if any of the ceasefire deal that was struck between Tel Aviv and Hezbollah had anything to do with Israel wanting to have its forces ready to carry out heavy operations in Syria once the instability took over. All right, next up here, more love for Al-Qaeda in Washington. U.S. considering removing HTS from terror lists after Syria takeover. So the U.S. is considering removing Al-Qaeda's offshoot, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, or HTS, from the list of U.S. designated terrorist organizations after the group led an offensive that ousted former Syrian President Bashar al-Assad. The Washington Post reported that the U.S. officials are in contact with HTS and other groups involved in the offensive. One official said the Biden administration was doing a real-time assessment on whether HTS should be removed from the list of foreign terrorist organizations. Politico reported there is, quote, furious debate among U.S. officials about the issue. There is a huge scramble to see if and how and when we can delist HTS, one official explained. HTS's leader, Abu Mohammed al-Jolani, also has a $10 million U.S. bounty on his head. The Middle East Eye reported that U.S. officials are debating the merit of keeping that bounty in place. An Arab official told the outlet that the debate has divided the Biden administration. Jolani was the founder of the Al-Nusra Front, or Al-Qaeda in Syria. In 2016, Jolani attempted to rebrand Al-Nusra by changing its name and cutting ties with Al-Qaeda. In 2017, HTS by merging al-Nusra with several other Islamist groups, including the remnants of ISIS. Jilani is now portraying himself as a moderate, and President Biden has said that he likes what he's hearing from the former al-Qaeda leader. Jesus, I can't believe this. We've taken notes of statements by leaders of this revolution in recent days. They're saying the right things now, but let's take on greater responsibility and we'll assess not just their words, but their actions, Biden said on Sunday. Removing HTS from the terror list could allow the U.S. to provide significant aid to an HTS-led government. Reports on Monday said that Mohammed al-Bashir, who was the prime minister of the HTS Salvation government in Idlib, has been appointed as the new prime minister of Syria. So let's talk about some of the strikes going on in Syria now. U.S., Israel, and Turkey launched airstrikes in Syria and cheer regime change. This one from Jason Ditt's December 9th, antiwar.com. Several nations have been loudly cheering the weekend regime change in Syria, some even taking credit for it, which is Israel. But despite the Islamist factions that they were backing end up taking Damascus, neither the U.S., Turkey, or Israel are actually stopping attacks on Syrian territory. If anything, they are increasing strikes. The U.S., Turkey, and Israel all carried out strikes inside their respective spheres of influence in Syria after the regime change was announced. None of them indicated these are to be seen as one-off strikes or special situations. Rather, it appears to be the new normal, which somewhat looks suspiciously like the old normal, just without Assad. On Sunday, Israel was carrying out major airstrikes across Syria, also sent ground troops into the countryside to seize more of the Golan Heights. They insisted the new territory was a buffer zone and have couched the airstrikes as targeting Syria's military assets. New Israeli airstrikes were reported on Monday against military depots, and Israel said the new territory seized was a temporary measure. They indicated that the airstrikes against sites across Syria would continue. The U.S. carried out multiple airstrikes across central Syria, saying they targeted known ISIS camps. They said they wanted to prevent Islamists from taking advantage of Syria's takeover by the separate Islamist faction. And so if these were known ISIS camps, I guess, why didn't the U.S. target them before Assad was taken out? Is it because they wanted them there? They wanted ISIS in Syria to help take out Bashar al-Assad. And now that Assad's gone, they are worried about the Islamic State becoming too much like it did during the Obama administration, where, yeah, they did want ISIS in Syria to take on Bashar al-Assad and lead to the collapse of the Assad government. But when Baghdadi declared his ISIS caliphate and crossed the Syria-Iraq border, well, then the Islamic State started posing real problems to the Americans. And I don't think they want to let that problem get that big again. So the U.S. hopes that the regime change will allow Syrian Kurds to take over even more of the oil-rich northeast. This clashes with Turkey's ambitions in the region to see the Kurds carefully under their thumb, even though both who are backing al-Qaeda-linked HTS and taking over the country. And so the difference here is that in the areas of Turkish influence, which is, I guess, really from the Turkish border all the way down to Damascus now, and then on the eastern side of the Euphrates River, I think about 10 to 15 kilometers from the border, the Turks back Arab fighters to lord power over the Kurds. And then the rest of the territory controlled by the United States, occupied by U.S. forces, we use our Kurdish proxies to rule the territory, and they really lord power over the local Arab population. And so that's kind of how Turkey and the U.S. divide in Syria. Now, another thing that's gotten mentioned quite a few times that I haven't seen anyone talk about, but U.S. officials have talked about being very worried about the Al-Hol prison camp in the SDF-controlled areas of Syria. This is a massive prison. There's, I think, like 50,000 people there. And they will say, oh, we're worried about these tens of thousands of terrorists leaving the camp. And that's not really who's in the camp. A lot of the people held there are now the family members of the Islamic State. And so, yeah, 10 years ago, these were kids. Now some of them, I'm guessing, are adults. There's women who are married to the Islamic State fighters, but those are a lot of the people in those camps. And so to simply say that we need to make sure this camp, this prison camp exists forever, really isn't any sign of justice or freedom, or the right thing. So Turkey's foreign minister has met the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres and is laying out a red line for Syria, saying they don't want either ISIS or the Kurdish PKK to benefit from the new situation, though Turkey mentions the PKK specifically, but historically they've been very flexible on the application of the label. The PKK's sister organization is the YPG, and that is the main Kurdish fighting force in Syria. The YPG is also the main fighting force behind the SDF, which is who the US is backing in Syria. And so it really didn't untangle that much of the geopolitical web that has kept the war in Syria going when Assad lost the war, which is at least, unfortunate for the Syrian people that they still have to, live under these conditions. All right, next up here, one quick update on Lebanon. Israel continues to violate Lebanon ceasefire, one civilian killed in latest strikes. So Israel continued its violation of the ceasefire in Lebanon on Monday by launching airstrikes in the southern Lebanese town of Bint Jabil that killed at least one civilian and wounded 4 Lebanese soldiers. The Lebanese army said in a statement, the Israeli enemy targeted a car near Safa al-Hawa military checkpoint, killing a civilian and lightly wounding 4 soldiers. A day earlier, Israeli strikes in southern Lebanon killed 3 civilians. Since the ceasefire was supposed to go into effect on November 27th, Israel has killed at least 24 people in Lebanon. And so it seems like the war, that ceasefire, that truce in Lebanon that was supposed to end the fighting, has really just de-escalated it to the levels that we saw maybe in the spring or early summer, where Israel's carrying out daily airstrikes, they're killing civilians, just not in the hundreds or the thousands, but rather in the dozens. All right, let's wrap up the show today with this story. China sanctions 13 companies in response to weapon sales to Taiwan. So this is from DaveDeCampAntiWar.com, December 5th. China has sanctioned 13 U.S. companies involved with the manufacturing of drones and AI in Beijing's latest protests against weapon sales to Taiwan, which have increased in recent months. So the Chinese Foreign Ministry told reporters, the Taiwan question is at the core of China's core interest. In recent months, the U.S. has announced multiple arms sales to China's Taiwan region. Lin says that the recent U.S. weapon sales greatly interfere in China's internal affairs, and Beijing decided to take countermeasures against relevant military companies and senior executives in the U.S. Recent U.S. arms sales have approved for Taiwan include support for the island's fleet of F-16 fighter jets, air defense systems, and radar systems. Taiwan also recently signed a contract to purchase 1,000 attack drones from the U.S. Besides the weapon sales, President Biden recently signed off on a $567 million military aid package for Taiwan, and shipped weapons straight from the U.S. stockpiles, a form of U.S. support first provided to the island in 2023, which marked a major escalation. The Chinese Foreign Ministry said in a press release that 13 companies China sanctioned include Daldane Brown Engineering, BRINC Drones Inc., Rapid Flight LLC, Red Sit Solutions, Shield AI Inc., Stitz US, Firestorm Labs Inc., Kratos Unmanned Aerial Systems Inc., Havoc AI, Neros Technologies, Cyberlunts Corporation, Domo Tactical Corporation, and Group W. The press release said that China also sanctioned 6 armed industry executives, including Barbara Brogavi, the president of the Naval Power Strategic Business Unit of Raytheon, Gerald Huber, vice president of the Naval Power Strategy Business Unit of Raytheon, Charles Woodburn, chief executive officer of BAE Systems Land, and then Richard L. Crawford, the founder and chief executive of Alliant Tech Systems Operations, Beth Etler, the president of Data Link Solutions, and Blake Resnick, the founder and chief executive officer of BRINC Drones. And so we'll continue to see tensions ratchet up between the U.S. and China, particularly as Trump takes office, where even his, foreign policy advisors, who I like on some issues, such as the, wanting to end the war in Ukraine or being less involved in Middle East wars, they all say that they only support that because they are preparing for a future war with China. All right, everybody. So I'm wrapping up the show for today. Thank you all so much for tuning in. Just want to remind people once again that I am recording another episode of the Kyle Anzalone Show today. So be sure to subscribe to the channel so you catch that episode. And I will be back with another episode of Conflicts of Interest on Thursday. Thanks, everyone.